That unprecedented planned summit between North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un and President Trump is set for June 12th in Singapore, or maybe not. North Korea is warning the event might not actually happen, while also suspending talks with South Korea, all of it over a pre-planned joint military exercise with the United States. Here's the message delivered on their state media.
This exercise targeting us, which is being carried out across South Korea, is a flagrant challenge to the Panmunjom Declaration and an international military provocation running counter to the positive political development on the Korean Peninsula. The United States will also have to undertake careful deliberations about the fate of the planned North Korea-US summit in light of this provocative military ruckus jointly conducted with the South Korean authorities.
Now, also speaking out is North Korea's vice foreign minister, who said his country will reject any proposal based, as National Security Advisor John Bolton reportedly suggested, on the Libyan model of full nuclear disarmament. White House spokesman Sarah Sanders was asked about that comment from the Korean vice minister. Here's her response.
The president is very used and ready for tough negotiations, and if they want to meet, we'll be ready, and if they don't, that's okay too. Look, again, this is the President Trump model. He's going to run this the way he sees fit. We're 100% confident, as we've said many times before, and as we all know that you're aware, he's the best negotiator, and we're very confident in that front.
Well, joining us now for more from Washington is Jenny Town. She's Assistant Director of the U.S.-based Korea Institute at Johns Hopkins University and the Managing Editor of 38 North. And Jenny, let me ask you, how much do you think of the Korean reaction is genuine, let's say, outrage, and how much is sort of calculated gamesmanship ahead of the summit?
Well, certainly there's a little bit of both, and you have to look at the statements a little bit separately, depending on the actors that are issuing them. For the KCNA statement that was talking about the joint military exercises, this was a lower level statement. It's meant to kind of air their grievances. It is a little bit curious why the U.S. ROK joint military exercises were going to include strategic assets, especially in light of the Panmunjom Declaration and ongoing negotiations. And so I think there's a lot there that, they are sort of testing the waters to see now, what is really implementable. And now that the summit is over, sort of where does that relationship go? The other statement, though, from Kim Tae-kwon is a little bit more serious, and I think, shows one, I think it's not Kim Jong-un saying it, so I think we're all, fine and moving forward with summit preparations. But, I think it's a reminder that this process has obligations on both sides. It's not just about North Korea, but it's about what all the actors are expected to do in order to change the fundamental political relationship there. And I think it's also a reminder that, messaging matters. Bolton is no longer a Fox News commentator. He's National Security Advisor, and so his words carry more weight. And so if you have Secretary of State saying one thing during negotiations and National Security Advisor saying another thing in public, this is a problem and really needs to be reined in, and there needs to be more consistent messaging, especially while negotiations are ongoing.
Jenny, there are certainly a lot of mixed messages coming out on the White House over foreign policy and policy towards North Korea throughout. One thing that seems to be clear, at least over just the last couple of weeks, is President Trump saying that his goal is high. His bar is being set high. He wants denuclearization of the entire Korean peninsula. And when we hear today from Pyongyang those messages saying we're not going to be pushed into a corner, is that too lofty of a goal to be setting to actually get anywhere in those talks?
Well, I think it really depends, too, on the difference between what's public messaging and where the actual negotiating room is. And I don't think we really have a good handle on that. Certainly in public, the public messaging is always going to be, setting the bar high and setting, the opening bid per se. But it does, make you wonder how much room there is for actual negotiation, how much flexibility there is. And I think, in the reports back from Pompeo throughout this process, there has been more leeway and more flexibility shown. And so, I think but it is it is good to remember also that, the North Koreans are watching all of this public discourse as well. And so the messages being sent, even if it's for domestic audiences, will have implications on an ongoing negotiation process.
But Jenny, looking maybe a little longer term, not just as a result of this summit, is denuclearization an option that Kim Jong-un is willing to consider? And if he was, what kind of price would he want to exact from the U.S. and South Korea in return?
I don't think we should say it's impossible. I think it is possible, but it certainly will come at a high price. And it's certainly not going to be easy, and it's not going to be achieved in a short amount of time because, again, denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula is contingent on, the removal of U.S. hostile policy. And what that means is that we generally have to have a fundamental change in the political relationship, and you can't just do that on paper. There has to be, a track record over time of the consistency in our relations in order to build up enough confidence for security guarantees and security assurances to have any meaning.
Jenny, I want to jump back to something you mentioned before, the domestic audience. Maybe one of the biggest mysteries surrounding North Korea is its public, is the relationship that the public has with its leader, is public opinion. Do you have any sense of how this is being viewed in North Korea? Is there any way to really measure that?
Well, certainly the message inside North Korea is much more controlled. Yes, there is a process going on. Yes, it is a diplomatic process. But some of the diplomatic steps that we've seen and concessions that we've seen can be characterized domestically as, we're closing the nuclear test site because we don't need to test anymore, because we've already accomplished that part of our development. And so there are a lot of ways that the North Koreans are definitely controlling the message at home to hedge against giving away too much. I think, the problem has become both in South Korea and the U.S. is that this has become sort of a made-for-TV summit process. Yeah. And unfortunately, when there's so much scrutiny and so much media and so many public messages here, it's very difficult to control. And it makes negotiations much more complicated as well because you do have fighting narratives. And I think at some point we need to the Trump administration as well as the Moon administration need to rein back in expectations and really get on the same page and form some consistent, coherent policy messaging from all the parties involved going forward.
All right. Well, President Donald Trump hasn't exactly seemed to be a big fan of keeping diplomacy and opinions private. So that'll be a very interesting point to watch, a challenge as we see how those talks unfold, maybe or maybe not, on June 12th. Jenny Town in Washington.